Hi, everyone. Welcome to another virtual astrology club. It's me, Claire Moon, and we're going to be talking about the forecast for October today. Sorry I'm late. I'm having some technical difficulties, but we got it. We got to figure it out. Turns out to do this, you got to copy pasta a bunch of links and put them into boxes and but we're here and we did it. Let me share my screen. So for any of you who are new, who haven't been to Virtual Astrology Club before, welcome. I'm Claire. I'm an astrologer. I'll be your astrologer for today. And what we do, we're just going to talk about the month ahead. I've picked out some of my favorite, most interesting transits I feel like we should have our eyes on. It's not an all-inclusive list. If I speed past a date or a transit that you have a question about, I do have a live chat. That's why we're doing it live, because I like having that chat that people can interact with, engage with. So if you're having questions, if I'm not making any sense, let me know in the chat there. If you have questions, put them in the chat. We got some people coming in now. We got a Brezki. I bet it's Breeski. My real name is Bree. So hi. And then we got Kyra. We got some familiar faces. We got Lisa. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming. Okay. So I think, is there anything else we need to do before we start? I think y'all can see the chart now. It says September 25th, but let's get into October. All right. So I guess maybe let's do a little debriefing. September's not over yet, but we've seen a lot of activity already. We had Mars going to Gemini. We have not had a lot of water in the sky. It's been, for me personally, I don't know, what everybody else's lives have been like, but holy busy, Batman. That Mars and Gemini, I mean, granted for me, it's in the fifth house. We're having fun. We're meeting up with friends all the time. I just moved back to a city I'm familiar with, so I'm seeing a bunch of people I don't normally, or I haven't been able to see normally. So it's just been like a flurry of activity, a flurry of communication. Wherever Gemini is in your chart, you might be experiencing the same kind of things. So just making that's going to continue to be the case. So as you know, if you're following astrology, we've all been talking about Mars and Gemini. It's going to be there for a long time. So now we've had a month to see what that Mars and Gemini is going to be about for each of us. So we can start to kind of make a game plan and be like, okay, this is how much I'm going to pace myself in this particular area of life. I'm going to keep focused. Not going to get too scattered, right? That's the plan. So hopefully you're all seeing that, clocking that, understanding what's going on there. Oh, we got Jody. Oh, I remember Jody. I remember you from a long time ago. You've been a supporter for a long time. I believe so, if I'm thinking of the right Jody. From Florida. Yeah, if you want to put where you're calling in from or where you're chatting in from. I'm in Wisconsin, if anyone's in the Midwest. And if you're from like a more exciting part of the world than the Midwest, definitely let us know. So what else for the month ahead? Where are my notes? Notes. So the other thing too is that September is going to be ending. We're already in a Mercury retrograde, but September is going to be ending and moving into August or into October, being in an opposition with Neptune. So that's really, we've been dealing with the Mars Gemini. We've been dealing with a lack of water in the sky. So there's not a lot of like connectivity, softness, squishiness. It's more like, let's get shit done. Who cares about your feelings? That's more of like the air, earth dryness that we have going on right now. But at the end of the month, what we're also going to have, unrelated, is a Mercury Neptune opposition. Mercury is going to be on the opposite side of the chart as Neptune, and almost in a adversarial sort of way where there's an impasse. It's two things that are a bit unreconcilable when we have an opposition, or it can feel that way at least. And we've got that between our planet of facts, Mercury, and our planet of fantasy, Neptune. So when it comes to just the switch over of the month, if we just want to kind of get into the first days here, it starts off a little confusing, if I'm being honest. Or sorry, that's Jupiter. There's Neptune. there's Mercury. And you can see this opposition here. You can see they're both retrograde. In my software, when a planet is retrograde, this is different in different softwares, but it makes it red. So that's why those numbers are red. That means that the planet is moving backwards in apparent motion in the sky. It looks like it's moving backwards. And when planets are moving backwards, they tend to be doing, it's like a reorganization of those themes, a recombobulating. We're rearranging, rethinking, reconsidering. And we're reconsidering, in this case, what is real? What is the fact? What are the facts? What is a fantasy in my mind that is idealistic and maybe not that attainable? At the same time, it can be, what little things in Virgo can I do to make my big, stupid dreams in Pisces become real, right? So there's lots of different ways this could come out. This is also the very spiritual with, again, just the very logical, reasonable, the artistic with the reasonable, rational. It's a little like this. So it's going to be, I think, like in our heads, in our minds, it might be an interesting day as we are recombobulating how we're thinking about these areas of our life, particularly looking at the areas where in your chart where you have Virgo and Pisces. But discernment, what little things can I do? Maybe even algorithmically, if this, then that. And it's not very sexy, but that is the kind of daily regular stuff we need to do or to be minded of, to get to the idealism, to get to the things that we really, really, really want to happen in Pisces. So that's how the month starts. I wouldn't be, in general with Mercury retrograde, we say, don't be agreeing to contracts, don't be doing these material world set in stone kind of things. We're just doubling down on that because we've got Mercury, who's super powerful, being Mercury in Virgo. We've also got Neptune, who's in Pisces. So it's just doubling down on all of those themes of this very solid footing and ungrounded footing, and how we hold space for both of those with discernment without making stupid choices. So I had mentioned over the last month, because of the retrograde stuff, because of Mars getting into Gemini and us still kind of figuring that out. Last virtual astrology club, I was saying how I was going to table some of my bigger decisions in life that I imposed with until October. Now we're in October. So I don't love this for big decision making, but look at what happens on the 2nd. So we get Mercury stationing direct. We get Mercury separating now from Neptune. So if we can just at least wait, if something is confusing in our life, if we can just wait until, last part of the first week of October, give it a few days into October, let this Mercury retrograde process dry out. We just had a Mercury Cazimi not that long ago, within the last few days here, in Libra. And that was the middle part of the retrograde story. So we just got done with about the middle part of Mercury's retrograde story. It doesn't end until beginning of October. And during a Mercury retrograde, we don't always have like all of the facts. We don't have all of the information that we need to move forward, or there's just things that have not coalesced into something meaningful quite yet. So give it just a little bit more time. But overall, like October feels much, much better to me personally for forging ahead with some of the things that might have been a little stagnant in September. I think that's all I have to say about that. And then too, on another qualities note, we got the qualities that make up the signs. We have, wet, dry, cold, hot. Those are our qualities. And I had mentioned not having a lot of water. What we have had a lot of is earth and air. And most of October is no different. For most of October, we just have a lot of air, a lot of earth. It is very dry, reasonable, rational. It is intellectual. It's very cognitive, and practical. Earth is practical stuff. It's of the material plane. When I say material, I mean like taxes, science, hard, my table material. But that doesn't leave a lot of room for water connection. Water is our feelings, it's our needs, it's caring for each other. It's holding space for the softness of being a human. And we don't have that for most of October. So again, if things are feeling spicy, if things are feeling heated, if you're in a battle you don't want to be in, it's going to be a lot easier to have those things kind of get away from us because there's not a lot of water. So be careful of all of your political debates. This just general region between Libra and Aries is pretty highlighted for October as well. There's plenty of potential to get into backyard barbecue debates. So just, make sure you want to be in them. Now, this is very different than the very end of October. Last kind of broad note on the month of October. The last week of October, it's like sploosh. You have entered the splash zone. It is like everything moves into Scorpio, not everything, a few things. And it's like the water is back. So, and then it's like a lot of water. Here's my concern for the month. If we are spending all of September, most of October being so analytical, intellectual, practical, logical, reasonable, and we aren't having any space for feelings or taking the time or slowing down, part of what water does is it moves a little bit more slowly. It gives us time to process things. If we haven't been doing that, and then at the very end of October, we get all these Scorpio planets and the first water we've had for these planets, besides the moon, in a long time, like it could just be a lot. So my strategy is that, weekly, I'm going to be checking in with myself, being like, did I feel my feelings this week? Have I actually been getting my physical needs met, my emotional needs, my spiritual needs met? Making sure that those things aren't going on the back burner so that when the end of October comes around, that things aren't like pressurized and they just like fall out of us. Sometimes Scorpio will do that where it will act like a pressure cooker. So, yeah, that was my big takeaway. But yeah, anyway, let's get back into the nitty-gritty of things. So I had mentioned, the first couple of days of the month starts out a bit confusing. I had said table the big decisions or things until like after those first few days of the month. Mercury stationing direct. Mercury also rising in the morning sky. So when any visible planet gets too close to the sun, within 15 degrees approximately, depending on landscape, atmospheric conditions, you can no longer see that planet. When Mercury stations direct, it will be coming out of the beams of the sun. It will be becoming visible. And the symbolism of that is that Mercury gets louder. It gets more effective. So any communication that we've been struggling to do, any planning we've been struggling to do, after the 2nd of October, that should get better. It should be a little easier to speak our mind. For better or for worse, it should be a little bit easier to plan, to get logistics in order. Thankfully we have Mercury in Virgo. I mean, I know they're retrograde and they're moving about a degree a day right now. They're not as fast as they could be going, but they're moving along. That being said, once a planet is visible, it's usually a bit more effective at what it's doing. So hang in there. Things feel a little stagnant right now, to me, at least with the skies, but things will be moving a little bit more in October. As far as like details, communications, facts. I always say, and I see this a lot, is that when I have clients come in and they're like waiting on a decision, waiting on information, waiting on just like a news back, you're waiting to get the message. It's like 200 years ago, they were waiting for like a horse to come with a letter. I feel like that's what Mercury retrograde is. It's like, we're waiting for the horse to come with our letter. Or when Mercury is under the beams, we're waiting for our information to come. When Mercury becomes visible, that information usually comes more easily. Oh, you know what else I forgot to do? I forgot to give the dates. So stations, we got on the 2nd, Mercury stationing direct. On the 8th of October, Pluto stations direct. I believe it's direct, yes. Already on the 16th, we only get a visible Mercury for a couple weeks and then they go back. They station and then they go back to the sun and they disappear. Saturn stations direct on the 23rd of October. And then the big one at the end of the month, we'll be talking about Mars stationing retrograde at the end on the 30th of October. So a lot of planets are all finally going direct. You know, everyone's been saying, there's 6 planets retrograde. Well, like 3 of those I don't give a shit about. Let's the really slow ones that are like always retrograde. They're like half of the year they're retrograde. I don't care. I care about their stations. I care about when outer planets are stationing, when they're louder that way. I don't care when they're retrograde. I digress. Anywho, we're going to have a lot more direct planets, but then Mars goes backward. So we'll get there. Lunation cycles on the 9th, we have an Aries full moon. On the 25th of October, we have a Scorpio solar eclipse in Scorpio. A solar eclipse is a new moon eclipse. And then in November, we'll have the second eclipse. I'll give a little preface for that at the end. We're going to talk about a traditional void of course moon happening on the 5th through the 8th of October. So did I say September earlier? If I said September, I meant October. Void of course moons, I don't normally deal with. I never am talking about void of course moons, but they have different definitions. So we're going to go over that. Yeah. And then ingresses, Mercury into Libra on the 10th, Sun and Venus into Scorpio on the 23rd, Jupiter into Pisces on the 28th. So we're getting that last little bit of Jupiter in Pisces. And then finally, Mercury enters Scorpio on the 29th. So like I said, by the end of the month, lots of Scorpio action, and we're going to have Jupiter in Pisces. So like splash zone is happening. Okay. Let's see what people say in the chat, and then we'll keep going with some of these details. Oh my gosh, look at all the activity. Oh, Kyra, did I know that you're not normally in Canada, are you? Have you been in Canada this whole time? And I just forgot. Hello from Houston. Hi, Jade. Yeah, like I said, lots of air in October. Yes, Jody, lots of air, but yeah, that's a kind of a continuation. Neptune can be the stoner. Yes, I agree with that. Adam, you're in Venice? Wow, that's fun. Look at all these people. I didn't even know where anybody was. This has been, Jody Arrington saying Mercury has been brutal this retrograde. Yeah, this retrograde has been loud, and I am not in a Mercury annual profection year. I do not have Mercury highlighted really in any way in my timings this year. And even so, yeah, very, very apparent. And I think part of that is because if we think about, okay, well, Mercury is retrograde, and that affects Mercury. That affects the houses that Mercury retrograde is in. So whatever houses in your chart contain Virgo and Libra. But we also have to consider what is going on in a Mercury retrograde with Mercury's other places that it rules. So what's happening in Gemini and Virgo while Mercury is retrograde, in retrograde motion. And of course, in Gemini, we have Mars, and it's been a trine. So all of Mars's free energy is free flowing very supportively to Mercury, at least when Mercury was in Libra. Now it's in a square with Mars, which is it's just always Mars putting input to Mercury. I think that's why this one's been really loud, at least from my perspective. I don't know. Has anyone else been noticing that? If you want to let me know in the chat, like, is anyone else noticing even? Yeah, because it depends on what your personal transits are. If you're not having other timings that aren't highlighting Mercury for you, a Mercury retrograde for you might not be as vivid and loud as it might be for someone else, or even since your last Mercury retrograde. So they're not all created equally. We don't all experience them the same. And that's why it's good to not come into retrogrades with anxiety, unless you know about all of those other little nuances and details. Oh, it was a digression. Anyway. Okay, cool. Well, thanks everybody. All right, got some good discussion in the chat. So let's get back at it. Let's talk about this traditional void of course moon. I'm going to skip over the 3rd and the 4th here. As you can see now, we've got some Libra planets. We've got a direct Mercury who is just hanging out. Mercury is going to continue to be in its shadow. So And that's why I'm like, give it a week. We talk about the pre-retrograde shadow, the post-retrograde shadow. For me, what that really correlates to is, there's pretty technical definitions of like when Mercury reaches this degree where it had originally stationed, blah, blah, blah. That's what defines the shadow. I like to think about it in terms of speed. Mercury or any planet, when it's going really fast, it's like someone who's running really fast. They're just booking along, getting shit done, doing their stuff. Hey, I'm this planet. I'm moving. We're making things happen. When the planet isn't moving, it's not necessarily that it's not getting stuff done. It's not necessarily that it's not doing its things. But it is not going to be doing them as fast, probably. Just a direct correlation. As above, so below, as above. If Mercury's going slower, my communication might be going slower. So even though Mercury is direct, Mercury is not moving fast. So we still need time to let Mercury catch up, start gaining speed again. And then those Mercury related things, communication, exchanges, travel, planning, technology, those themes will start moving along a little better. What was I even? Oh yeah, void of course moon. Okay. Let's talk about that void of course moon. So void of course, we hear mostly about that concept from medieval, Renaissance, more of the middle part of the historical tradition of Western astrology. And what void of course moon essentially is it's a time when the moon is not connecting with other planets in the ways that it normally does. And it leaves the moon unable or not as easily able to have like successful outcomes, to actually like manifest what the moon wants to do. And the Greek word for void of course was kenodromia. And kenodromia, like a lot of Greek words, can be translated into several different possible things because we don't always have these direct translations. Things that people express in other languages don't always translate into a different language just because of culture and how culture has its fingerprint in language, and language has its fingerprint in culture. They're both very, very intertwined. And so we get these, it's like, that's why German has such cool words like Fraudenscheid, or what was that word? Fraudenscheid. I'm saying it so wrong, and I think I'm spelling it wrong. But German language has a bunch of cool words for stuff that English just doesn't. So does Japanese. I feel like a lot of languages have words like we just don't have. Kenodromia could mean running in the void, a void course. God, where the hell? My Demetra book, it's over there. But running in the void, empty course, that was one of them, a literally empty course. So the moon is moving through, it's running through the void, it's running through the emptiness, empty course. You can get a sense of what all of these translations mean. The moon is moving through a space and it's empty. There's not a lot happening. There's not a lot going on in there. And I like to think of the moon when it's interacting with other planets. It's like the moon allows us an easier way to engage with those energies. It almost gives like a set of handholds to work with all of the planetary energies. In ancient times, the way that they philosophized and conceptualized about these things was that, we had the earthly realm, and then we had all the planets. And then above that, we had all of the fixed stars and all of the royal stars, which were a whole different type of spiritual energy or energy. I don't know what the right words are. The moon was tasked with bringing down those effluences or that energy down to Earth. And the moon is also really, not only is the moon in charge of connecting the planets together and sharing all of those energies and helping the planets make connections with each other, the moon also helps us make connections with the planets. The moon helps the planets make connections with us. So when the moon isn't connecting to any of that, we can't get any handholds on these effluences or energies. It's just harder to make something out of stuff. And so they would recommend, if the moon is void of course, don't be planting things. Don't be going fishing. Don't do things in the material plane that you want something to come of it. And one of the stereotypical examples of something like to do on a void of course moon is like, God, I'm going to have to find who said this. It was someone who was on the astrology podcast like over a year ago talking about void of course moon. I'll link it after this, but that's the person who I heard give the example of she was doing her tax returns on a void of course moon because like didn't want to get taxed, right? You want nothing to come of this. So materially speaking, in the material world, don't be starting new projects. Avoid starting new projects. If you're like, I want that to work out, don't start it between October 5th and October 8th. So what do we do with this period of time? And I'll get to more technical stuff in a second. What should we do during this void of course time between the 5th and the 8th? I think more of like new moon activities, connecting with spirit, connecting with the immaterial. What do we do in a void space? We meditate, like ideally. I mean, that's the goal. Like if you're doing a spiritual practice of reflection, if you're doing contemplative practices, if you are doing those practices where you need to be quiet, perfect for this. A void is perfect. That's exactly what I want. So like also connecting with family. There's so many things in our life where like we don't need to make anything of this. We don't need to be productive all the time. Like fuck productivity, right? Like capitalism. Just spend time with people you love. Spend time with your family. Like that, those things are already there. Like we don't need to, not to say we take them for granted, but like, I don't know. I just think it's a good opportunity to just hang out with people you love, not getting anything done, maybe, in the material world, and be in spirit, be in those more contemplative, reflective states. That's what I'm going to be doing with this time. So what is the actual definition then? Because the definition I think most of us are familiar with is that when the moon is usually coming to the end of a sign, and before it leaves that sign, it doesn't have any other connections with other planets. So like say, the moon here that we have on the clock right now, arbitrarily, we have it at 19 degrees of Aquarius. It's still making connections with everything, but let's just pretend like it wasn't going to meet anyone else on its way to the end of Aquarius. That would be a void of course moon in more the Renaissance tradition. It happens quite a bit, but it's usually, just a day or a part of a day. Like it's usually not super long because the definition is more narrow. The definition gets wider with Hellenistic astrology, where it's the moon, and we're only dealing with the visible planets. So we're not dealing with the outer planets at all because they didn't have those. But it's when the moon is not going to make any applying configuration or completing a configuration with a planet within 30 degrees. The other thing is that the Renaissance traditions, they just had whenever that planet, or in this case, the moon, goes over a sign boundary, that breaks the spell. So then the moon's good. It's like we crossed into Pisces, we're good. With Hellenistic void of course moon, you can go past sign boundaries. Spell's not broken. Like you got to go through that whole 30 degrees of running in the void to experience that. And so if we get into the details here, Mars and the moon, they're going to come into a trine relationship. And then the moon is going to have no other interactions until it gets into Pisces and meets Mars. Oops, too far. It meets Mars by a square. Right? Oops. There. Oh yeah, I'm by the hours, not the days. Software, am I right? Yeah, okay, here. So October 7th. Yeah, it probably depends on what time zone. This is like this is kind of right on the edge of the day. So actually October 7th, depending on your time zone, depending on what part of the world you're in, this could be done by the end of October 7th. It may carry on into the early morning on October 8th. Okay. Where did I get I want to cite my resources for this. So if you want to look up void of course moons, astroseek.com has a great calculator. That's how I get this information. And you can set all the settings, look for your Renaissance flavored void of course moon, look for your Hellenistic flavored void of course moon, all the planets, some of the planets. It gives you all kinds of options. Chris Brennan has he's got the astrology dictionary.com. If anyone's not familiar with that, lists out really neatly the 3 definitions we're aware of for void of course moon and how they differ. And then just Demetra George's volume 1, her chapters on the moon discuss that as well. So that's where I got all of that information if anyone's interested in that. And I think I'm ready to move on. Does anyone have any questions about void of course moon? Otherwise, we're going to talk about Pluto. Where did my things go? Oh, okay. Wow. So much discussion. This is fun. I like when we nerd out. Jody asks, what are the shadow degrees for Mercury's retrograde? Let's see. 24 degrees of Virgo is where Mercury is stationing direct. And so the shadow period started when Mercury was at 24 degrees of Virgo several weeks ago. When Mercury gets to 8 degrees of Libra, that's when the shadow will be over. So let's just fast forward really quick, because 8 degrees of Libra is where Mercury stationed retrograde on the 10th of September. And so once Mercury stations direct, moves back into Libra, and then we get to 8 degrees of Libra. Now, October 16th, that's it. We're dusting our hands of it. The post shadow is over. Mercury should be clipping along just fine. I hope that answers your question. I could put those dates too. Those are good dates to have. Anna says, oh, hi, Anna. Hi. I can't remember if it's Anna or Anna. Anna is like the English teacher version. Yeah. I can't remember. So they're saying Mercury is not highlighted for me. Plus I am Mercury retrograde native, but I can really see a lot of schedule changes, technology problems around me. The world clearly is very affected. Yeah. So Anna's seeing the Mercury retrograde be really loud too. And, babies who have Mercury retrograde in their chart tend to handle Mercury retrograde transits a little bit better because they're just used to that energy. It's always Mercury retrograde for them. So they're like, welcome, I've been here the whole time. Oh, hold on, Jade. Pluto is leaving your whatever that is, Capricorn in 2025. We have a little bit left of Pluto in Capricorn, so it's not quite, but it is Yasmin Boland. Thank you, Jody. You were also, I remember this. This is such a Mercury retrograde thing. You literally had my ass last time too. You were like supporting me with citations months ago. You also helped me remember someone then too, I feel like. So Jody is clearly my citations assistant when my brain can't do it. Oh, and Anna's saying Schadenfreude, which is the German word for when you get satisfaction out of someone else's dissatisfaction. Oh, and Jade is saying the Honeycomb Collective personal astrological journals, they have void of course moons in them. Yes, they do. And also Llewellyn has this cute little, there's like a little Llewellyn planner that you can get. It's like this big. My friend got me one a few years ago, and they have void of course moon all up in there too. But that's the Renaissance, more recent definition that is much more, it's narrow, but it's more common. All right. Yay. Teamwork makes the dream work. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That person who was talking with the astrology podcast about void of course moon so long ago was Yasmin Boland. They're the ones doing their tax returns on a void of course moon. That's where I got that. Okay. So on the 6th, we've got Mercury, and we're going to be trining Pluto here. So when planets interact with Pluto, It can be a little twisty. It can be a little complicated, a little heavy. It's not usually super fun stuff. It can be transformative. It can be transcendental. We can, you know, we can use Pluto transits for, things that aren't bad. But I think Pluto gets painted quite a bit as just like, it's a crisis in a jar. Here you go. Uh, when planets are in trine or sextile relationships to Pluto, it gives us an opportunity to work with that energy more constructively. It gives us a chance to it's like seeing behind the curtain a little bit so that you can actually get a lay of the land to navigate it. It's like being able to go deep into a place that is usually very uncomfortable, that it's so uncomfortable that we probably try to avoid it without even realizing it. And when a planet is trine or sextile to Pluto, I feel like we can actually engage with that discomfort a little easier. And sometimes it comes unintentionally. Sometimes something happens externally to elicit us to be thinking about these themes. But if y'all would put your attention in your own chart to where you have Virgo, to where you have Capricorn, whatever you're doing in Virgo can help what's going on in Capricorn during these couple days here. And in this case of Virgo, it's like I'm planning things. I'm having very algorithmic responses to the world around me. It's like, if this, then that. It's a flow chart in Virgo. It's very algorithmic. It's like, okay, that's what's happening. Now this is happening. If this is the case, then this is how we'll do it. It's very much like the old adage of, or it's like a Buddhist saying of, is there a solution? Then why be upset? Is there not a solution? Then why be upset? It's like very Virgo algorithmic. What little Virgo things can we do to help the Capricorn parts? Something in our Capricorn area feels heavy to us. It feels like it has control over us. It feels like we just can't. It's very difficult to manipulate, to navigate whatever's going on in Capricorn. It feels out of our control. It just feels heavy and it's weighting and causing pressure. What little things can we do to relieve that pressure? What little things, practical things, can we do to help the Capricorn parts feel a little lighter? That's what I'm going to be doing with this energy. It's very practical. So let's just say you're like a Cancer rising, and maybe this is your third house in Virgo, and this is your seventh house. And maybe there's some really heavy shit happening in your seventh. Maybe you're having difficulty with partner work. Maybe you're working with partners at your work. It can be a business partner, it can be a romantic partner. And you just feel like that part of your life has control over you, or you don't have control over it, and it's controlling you. And it feels heavy and complicated and dark and twisty. And what things in the third house of communication, the regular people around you, that you can do, the way your mind, even like the third house being a place of the mind, the moon, the joy of the moon. The moon used to be correlated with the mind, not just Mercury. In this place of communication, the mind, our regular people, what little things can we do to alleviate this pressure? Maybe we can communicate really practically and be like, hey, I can only do this, this, and that. And maybe that's terrifying to do, to tell this area, like, yep, this is all, it's being very frank and practical and communicating that. Might be scary, but it might actually relieve the pressure in the partnership place. Perhaps in the third house, you're working, like it just feels like maybe a group project or something at work, and you just feel so responsible to the other. And by simple discernment and delegation and not letting your emotions get the best of you, you can actually navigate and take the pressure off of yourself. So don't be afraid to, with Mercury, it's just doubling down, especially on those themes of communication, words, planning, math, like logistically speaking, what can we do? That's all I have to say about that. Dates for those. So if you want to look back in your calendar, like 8/22 was the first one, 9/26, and then 10/6. Those are the dates. So August 22nd was our first September 26th was our second. And then October 6th, this is the last of the Mercury trines to Pluto. So these are actually themes that have been going on since the end of August through September. So again, look at those Virgo and Capricorn areas and see what things can be improved upon by just being discerning and logical and rational and not letting your emotions get the best of you. And knowing that like you can't be in control of everything. You can't be perfect and competent all the time. You know, Capricorn wants to be in control. Pluto wants to be in control. Saturn wants to be in control. Capricorn wants to be in control. They want to be competent. Capricorn's nightmare is people thinking it's incompetent. So that can weigh very, very, very heavily on the Capricorn parts of our chart. And Virgos doesn't tend to ask for help. It tends to want to be the helper. So we might have to do some adjusting there, but this trine, it's a trine. So, you know, it's much more likely that that will be achievable during this last part of the first week of October. Okay. On the 6th, that's happening. On the 7th, we are going to get Mars square Neptune. And this is something too, where it almost, depending on the situation, it could actually, the themes could dovetail pretty good with the Mercury Pluto business that's happening in the material plane. But Mars and Neptune feels to me like ask for consent before you help, before you intervene, before you just martyr yourself or be the servant or whatever. Ask the person if they even need your help. This is a little crunchy. It's like having a problem and the two people that are trying to work on it together are a computer coder who's super reasonable and analytical and a priest who's super philosophical and maybe more minded toward forgiveness. Now, interestingly, the moon is also going to be nearby. I'm going to get them back here so we can see that, because the moon just, it highlights that signature for the day. So on the 8th, it's a Saturday, a Friday, the first weekend, second weekend in October, October 7th and 8th. The moon is just highlighting this. And the moon is super flexible already in Pisces. It's very adaptable. It's forgiving. And it has the upper hand position. It's overcoming Mars. So the moon is the one calling the shots. And the moon is saying, let's be forgiving. Let's be soft. Let's be spiritual. Let's be open. Let's help. Let's, give it our all to be the glue of society or whatever the hell they're thinking that they are up here. And Mars doesn't want to operate that way. Mars wants to just pile right through. They want to go forward, full steam ahead. And they are not interested in forgiveness. They're not interested in philosophy necessarily. They're not interested in these wider concepts. They're just like, nah, but here's this fact and this thing, and that guy's a dick, and I'm going to tell him. So we need some adjustment. And Mars is the one that is being asked to make the adjustment, because the moon and Neptune up here have the upper hand position. They're like, no, Mars, we're going to be soft. We're going to be, we're going to be so soft. So it's just a little uncomfortable, and that's why I'm like, okay, if they want to help, let's just make sure we even need to bother, because Mars might not even be in agreement with exactly how we're going about everything. Yeah. Inspired action. That is a thing though. I mean, especially with a square, it's of the nature of Mars. There's something that's dissatisfying that we need to remedy with a square. And this could very much be inspired action. Mars is effort. It's very inspired by the larger picture. And maybe it's coming out in Gemini, how we talk, how we take in new information, how we try to not necessarily organize all of that information. That's more of Virgo's job, but just taking in enough information to get what you need. Like Mars is going to be much more interested in that. It's not going to be interested in the wider picture. So we just might need to make a little bit of adjustments in how we are working with those energies. And then once, moon moves on, Once it gets into Aries, then that might be the point where acting is going to make more sense, where putting in effort is going to make more sense. It's going to be in a sextile at that point, and that's not until the following day. So if you're feeling like this super big impulse to jump into something on the 7th of October on Friday, wait till the 8th. We already know there's a void of course moon also happening, void of course, not void of course. Hello, my Midwestern accent. My grammar doesn't exist. When the moon gets into Aries, the void of course part will also be done. So there's a couple reasons, there's mounting reasons why it's like, even though things are moving along a little bit more in the first week of October, things are still being sorted out. Things are still being sorted out. All right. So on the 8th, we get also Pluto stationing direct. The moon is enclosed by benefics on that day, and most of the day, well, some of the day on the 9th too. So it seems like a good day for just, like if you did have Mercury Pluto insights with that trine, when Pluto stations direct, it could be more insights. It could just be more solidification, validation of those insights or those things you've been learning about the Capricorn part of your chart. And we might be handling those things in a different way. When a planet is moving direct versus forward or backward versus forward, it really speaks to doing things in different ways. Doing things as expected, doing things not as expected, thinking about things in a mainstream way, thinking about things in a not mainstream way. When Pluto goes direct, it's a chance to do that a little bit differently. So again, it makes sense that if we would have just had some insights from Mercury being here, then now we're ready to actually really move forward to make those transformative changes. It's not going to be fast. This is a wide curve. Capricorn does nothing quickly. So it's like the insights might come in. That doesn't mean that everything's going to be perfect and amazing. It takes time to have those transformations happen. And it's very much that long game of maybe in 3 months from now at the next Mercury retrograde, you'll be like, wow, I've come a long way. I've made a lot of improvements, and those type of improvements that I think we make internally are those subtle changes in our attitudes, in our habits, in our private habit patterns. Those are things that you really can't see until you get far enough away, until you can see it in its more fullness in the rear view mirror. So all just to say, when Pluto stations direct, it's not some magic light switch that we flip on and off and things shift and things change and we feel different. But it does speak to a bit of that process that, again, it's a trine. So it's a constructive direction. I don't hate it. Then we have a full moon in Aries on the 9th. So the last full moon we had, the planets that were in charge of it were not having any aspects with the places where the sun and the moon was. So it felt a little disjointed. This one's very different. We've got Mars, who can see where the moon is. Venus, who rules the place of the sun, is also here, can help guide the sun. And so all of these planets are and Mars is in a harmonious sextile trine. So this just feels very enthusiastic. If you have something to share, it feels like a great time to share it. Another thing too is that Mars is separating from Saturn. Saturn is giving some really good restraint just by the sign-based trine. This whole time that Mars is in Gemini, we have this really nice trine coming from Saturn that's helping to restrain a little bit of Mars's energy in a constructive way. It's helping Mars to build a container for all of that disparate energy wanting to do this and that, and we can do a billion things, and I'm probably going to be good at most of them because I'm Mars and Gemini, but we can only do so much in 24 hours. We don't have a Martial 30-hour day. We have an Earth 24-hour day. Now, here's the thing. Full moons, though, are for sharing. Full moons are for going out there and being seen and being bright and being heard. And Mars has less of that restraint. It has less of that because it is moving away from this trine with Saturn. So it just seems like kind of let her rip. I've been saying a lot of stuff about not letting it rip. Last month, I was just like, the whole thing with Mars and Mercury, and then, Venus, or I should say the whole thing between Jupiter and Mars. Jupiter and Mars have been feisty people. And then like Mercury and Venus up in Virgo, Libra land, they've been trying to keep things on the rails. It's like Jupiter and Mars want to fuck around and find out. The planets going through Virgo and Libra, they don't want to do any of that. They just want peace. That's what I have been saying. Now I want to give you the opposite message. This is like, just fuck around and find out. I don't know. Like, I think it's a good opportunity to do it. Don't get any over enthusiastic harebrained schemes and agree to them and definitely set them in stone. Don't do that. But like, if you've been working on something, particularly over the last couple weeks, if there's been some percolations happening, if you've had some insights, commit, do it. Like, do the thing, share the thing. If you made your loaf of bread, I'm always using the bread example for lunations. If you've made your loaf of bread, share it with enthusiasm and just go for it. Like, so that's my feeling. I love this new moon, or this full moon. Sorry. It just felt very effervescent and bright and shiny. All of the planets that are in charge of the luminaries can see them, direct them, guide them with a nice stable hand for the most part. So I don't see anything that's overall too concerning. We do kind of have this, it's one of these out of sign but by degree aspects between Mars and Jupiter. So I'm not saying that we won't be able to get ourselves in trouble under this full moon. If you get into an argument online, it might be really visible. So just, if you don't want a visibility on something, don't do it, because it might be visible. It might be really successfully visible. Now, Venus smoothing over anything, I think, that gets funky. Very diplomatic, charming, witty. Just because we can clean up all the rough edges doesn't mean we just leave all the rough edges go, but I don't know. It just felt like a very solid, decent time to be putting your best foot forward. Yeah. So after that, oh yeah, and let's talk about those Mercury Jupiter opposition dates. So I had mentioned kind of the out of sign but by degree. When I've talked about that ad nauseum. I'll probably be talking about it ad nauseum for the rest of my life. In traditional astrology, yes, we are much more into sign-based aspects. That doesn't mean that we ignore degree-based aspects. Traditional astrologers, we are still, or traditional leaning astrologers, we're still doing degree-based stuff. So I do count it. September 1st, September 18th, and October 12th. Those are your 3 Mercury opposite Jupiter dates. So if you can see anything's happening in your own life, if you want to look at your journal, see what was going on there, looking at the Aries, Libra parts of your chart. Again, that was September 1st, September 18th, and then again on October 12th, that those themes of Mercury opposite Jupiter might be coming through the most vividly. And then we have the perfection of that Mars square Neptune on the 10th. So remember that inspired action, but just make sure that before you're intervening, that you're actually welcome to do so. And then on the 12th, actually, I'm going to back up. So on the 11th, Venus enters a trine within 3 degrees to Saturn. And Saturn is exalted in Libra. Libra is where we start losing light in the northern hemisphere. Saturn is like, yeah, fuck that light. We don't need it. So Saturn likes Libra. It's like, yeah, we're losing light. I like this relationship. This just feels like ultimate diplomacy. Just such good navigation of relational issues. If you have relational things, if you are having social quandaries, this is a great time to work through those challenges. Mid-October, October 10th, October 11th, even a few days after, just mid-month, we're going to have the ability to anchor in relationships. If there are relationships we have with people that we really care about, this might be a second chance to kind of anchor those in. I say second chance because Saturn is retrograde. So maybe we're kind of coming back to something, having another look at it. But they're working in harmony. It's like Libra's giving Saturn all of the guidance that it needs to build the connections that it wants to for the long term. So just doing some reflection on those days and acting accordingly, prioritizing accordingly, allowing our values to inform those structures. I think a lot of times we build up a whole life based on values that aren't ours. Like we just say, oh, wow, those are my parents' values, or those are the values of the people that I grew up with in my hometown, or these are the values of the people I work with. These are the values of my industry or my profession. My profession values this, and so I must value this. And it's sometimes it's so easy to do that, and we don't even notice because, depending on the chart, a lot of people with like 7th, 8th house planets, they easily can get enmeshed in other people's values. So making sure whatever you are building reflects what you actually like, what you actually enjoy and care about, and what you prefer. And that it's not about what is expected of you. So that would be a very good reflective thing to do on these days as well. Mid-October, this whole time we have Venus in Libra. It's like Venus is the planet of values. It's what we prefer. We can't control our preferences for the most part. My therapist told me that once. We want to control our preferences. It's like, why do I like that? Why do I not like that? I wish I just liked that, or I wish I just didn't like that. You can't do that. You can't should yourself out of preferences. And so it's actually wise to responsibly build them in to whatever you're building. And this is a good month to do that. Okay. What else? So, yeah, and by the 14th, we have kind of an assertive social energy. It is very charming. In general, like we are going to have the ability to be such big social butterflies. I just don't want us to overdo it with that even. I don't ever want to discourage like generosity, socialization, especially being we've been so socially starved for a couple years now. But with the benefics in opposition, and I should have mentioned this when Venus actually enters into Libra, she's going to be really, this is going to be more of an issue earlier in the month, overdoing it just socially. Social Venus in Libra, overly enthusiastic Jupiter in Aries, so enthusiastic. So there's a potential here to just be like more. And like I said, that's more at the end of the month, but it is kind of all month. Pace yourself. I've said that with Mars and Gemini, but also pace yourself with social engagements, indulgence. I steal this from, I was looking at it in planets in transit, what this opposition was, because it's like Jupiter and any of the benefics in a square, any of the benefics in an opposition, even though those aspects themselves can be challenging, when it's two benefics, it's like the problem can be too much of a good thing. The adjustment needed is to make sure that we're not overdoing it, or the balance needs to be making sure we're not overdoing it. Jupiter wants to say yes to everything very quickly in Aries, and in Libra, Venus wants to please everybody. You can see how that recipe could get us in trouble. It's like, we just want to help people. We're super optimistic. I'm Jupiter in Aries. I can do it. No problem. And then we might find out later in the month when we get all that water and we're actually like in touch with our needs again, and we're actually in touch with our feelings and our bodies more again, we can be like, oh my God, why did I agree to all that shit? Oh my God, why did I do all of that? Oh my God, what was I thinking? So more at the beginning of October, pace yourself with all that, because these two are going to want to, and they're going to feel like they can do it all. Anywho, back to the third part of the month here. So on the 14th, that's what I was talking about. On the 14th, it just feels like with the moon with Mars It's trine Jupiter. So all that effervescent, bubbly energy is just like coming right down to very verbal, talkative, curious, explorative Mars in Gemini. It feels fun, and it feels kind of just intellectually playful in a way, like a playful banter or playful sparring or something like that. But again, just make sure all those sharp words in Gemini that we don't intend to be, or just the things we say that we don't intend to mean anything, and then it'll accidentally mean something to somebody. It's like it doesn't come out of our mouth imbued with meaning, but it enters someone else's brain imbued with meaning. Just be careful about that. And then this is in that trine relationship to this. So it's just all in all, this combination of trine, sextile with all these planets, it feels just very fun and bubbly and assertive and cognitive and intellectual. And so if you're doing those things on that day, on the 14th, if you're getting together with friends and just having a chit chat, it sounds like an actually really good day to do that, as long as we're all just being mindful and watching our words and watching the quickness, the speed at which we are doing things. And I mean, I think we're going to want to socialize. We're going to want to be out there doing stuff. That's the thing too. With Libra energy, it is external. It is emitted. And all month we have Venus within 3 degrees of the sun. You can see that here. Venus is at 19. The sun is at 21. That's on the 14th. And that's just going to keep being the case. And then later we'll start talking about the kazimi between these two. But we have Venus in her own sign with the sun all month long. This is very externalized. We are emitting. It's a daytime sign. Some people call it masculine if we're doing the gender way of talking about the signs. I like to use nocturnal, diurnal, nighttime, daytime. The overlying premise of all of it, no matter how we label it, what words we're using, the idea is that the nighttime signs are receptive. They respond to an influence. Daytime signs emitting the influence. They're doing the influencing. So air and fire are doing the influencing. Earth and water are responding. Air and fire are going out there, being loud, being external, being manifest, being seen more easily. Earth and water, they're responding. They're more internalized. They're keeping things to themselves. They're contemplating. They're thinking about it more with themselves. Or just working more quietly. And like I said, responding to whatever the daytime signs and planets are doing. So all the point just being, this is out there. Libra's out there. So we're going to want to be out there. So I don't want to tell anyone to not be out there doing the stuff. Just don't agree to everything. Don't say yes to everything. And just watch your mouth. And in general, I say, when the moon is with Mars, those are usually the days where I say, mind your own business. Those are my mind your own business days. Watch your own bobber. This is not one of them. This is a trine. I think it's going to be fun. I'm not worried. So go out there on the 14th or when was this? Yeah. Like the 14th, do what you're going to do. Be out there, be alive. On the 15th, the sun and Mars, that trine really starts to heat up. So the sun is moving faster than Mars at this point. Mars is slowing down. It's reaching its station degree that it'll eventually station at 25. And so by the 17th, we're really, and then it's done. On the 16th and the 17th, we are building up to this. And I think that's just more of that busy, social, intellectual energy. So if you've got a lot of communicating to do, if you've got a lot of moving parts, balls in the air by mid-month, this, again, 14th, 15th, 16th, these days are days where we might really be just planning, organizing, exchanging with others a lot. And yeah, just use it for that, go with that. That's, if you feel like doing all of those things, go do all of those things. Again, this is a different message. I've been saying, don't multitask, try to slow down all the time. Mercury's retrograde, Mercury's opposite Neptune. By the middle of October, we don't have those caveats anymore. We don't have those concerns. So if you've got a lot of intellectual stuff to do, writing, speaking, get her done. Do it. Sun trine Mars is just that vitality. The sun is our vitality. Mars is a bit of our vitality in terms of effort, energy to do stuff. So when we get them together by trine, that just feels like a lot of motivation, a lot of ambition, a lot of energy. Winds at our back to do those things. And now we're going to start with the Venus Cazimi. The big thing, everyone, like the two biggest things of the month that everyone's excited about: Venus Cazimi, Mars retrograde at the end of the month. Those are the two big things. Venus and Sun together. I was just talking about how daytime signs are emitting, they are influencing, they're putting their energy out externally for other people to respond to connect with other people. When Venus is with the sun, Venus and the sun start to share significations, especially when they get within 3 degrees of each other. So all of those solar indications, solar, our will, the sun, we are the center of something and we are engaging. I'm moving through the world with my identity. And this is my calling. This is my will. I am the sun. Let's go do it. I'm going to just be me and I'm going to shine. When we get Venus involved, now we're getting a solar Venus. We're getting Venus, who is values, but now the sun comes in and says, I'm going to embody the shit out of my values, and I am going to go forward with my will based on my values in a very clear way. No confusion, no bullshit necessary. When they are in their sign, in Venus's sign, all of the stuff that we say about the sun's rays harming a planet, it doesn't do that anymore. So I'm always talking about planets being under the beams. I was just talking about it with Mercury coming out of the beams, being visible, going under the beams of the sun, becoming invisible. Generally, we would say the same thing about Venus being close to the sun, but there is a loophole. And that loophole is called Venus being in its chariot. When a planet is in its chariot, it's like having a sunbrella. It's like being in a tractor and having the cab, boots with the fur, tractor with the cab. That's what we have when we've got a planet who is in their chariot, and they can't be harmed by the sun's rays when they're in their own sign. So having Venus in Libra with the sun like this, I'm really excited for it because Venus is Venusing, connecting with others, and it's such a cognitive sign. Like, it's beyond connecting with others. It's like our ability to think and incorporate and integrate others into our life becomes more clear. So social relational confusions can be clarified, can be validated, can be confirmed during this month. And just having that solar expression mixed with Venus, it's like, not only I'm not just having the values, now I'm doing it. Now I'm like embodying it, and I'm actually acting out in the world and presenting myself and presenting my identity in a way that really truly reflects my values, in a way that reflects the relationships that I want, versus just keeping it inside or something, or versus just continuing to go on with your life in the status quos as they are without doing the solar thing of, I'm going to do me and I don't care. So that's going to be great. Now with a Cazimi, it's a lot of that same principle of this clear expression of Venus with that solar energy of our will and our identity. That just is exemplified by the Cazimi. So again, for anyone who's not familiar with Cazimi, that is a word that means when a planet is within 1 degree of the sun. That's the technical definition. Hellenistically speaking, it's within 1 degree. That's a Cazimi. If we're talking Renaissance, medieval, later type of definitions of Cazimi, they're actually more strict, similar to, sorry, I won't say that. I won't conflate those two things, but 1617 arc minutes is much more narrow, that definition. So it's these little numbers here. The big numbers are the degrees. The little numbers are the arc minutes. So, medieval tradition, the Cazimi is a narrower range of time. The Hellenistic definition of kazimi, it's a longer range of time because they just have to be within 1 degree. If they are 1 degree and 3 arc minutes away, it doesn't count. It doesn't count. We got to cut it off somewhere. I'm not a cuspy person. I don't think cusps exist. You're there, you're not there. I am not Hermione Granger. I cannot be at 2 places at once. The planets are not Hermione Granger either, for you Harry Potter fans. So that is a kazimi. Oprah is the example that we use a lot for our Venus and kazimi person. And we all know how absolutely charming Oprah is, and witty and relationally intelligent, and all of those Venusian principles. Oprah definitely demonstrates them very, very clearly and well. And that is a great example of a Venus kazimi. We're not done talking about it though. I'm going to check in on this chat. I know a lot of people are picking to do things. I heard people getting married during this Venus kazimi that's coming up. So I think a lot of people have plans for it, but it is an extra fascinating one because it changes signs halfway through. So not only do we get this experience and this chance to observe a Venus Cazimi in Libra, Venus's home sign, when she is totally protected from the beams of the sun and doesn't have to deal with any of that shit. And then it's going to end with Venus couldn't be further away in terms of significations in Scorpio. And then we get to see what it's like having a Venus Cazimi in Scorpio. That is a rare opportunity. We do not get, and rare doesn't mean special. Rare doesn't mean good or bad. Rare doesn't mean that it's better or cooler or more potent. It's literally just more rare and thus interesting to witness. So I'm very excited about that. Again, it begins on October 17th, as soon as, oh gosh, I'm not a by the hours person unless we're talking about the moon, usually. And then I guess I had another digression, but I'll hold off on that. Yeah, anyway, you can see here. It's going to be in the morning midday on October 18th. And this extends for a good part of a week. I mean, if we just watch them moving along, they're within a degree for many, many days, even here on the 26th. Maybe that's the last day. And then we have that new moon, of course. The moon is going to come along and just make it even louder. So in any event, Cazimi is that pure expression of Venus. It's a time where Venus can really show herself and do it in a way that's much more emitting, influential, and just like of the nature of your will with the sun, with your spirit, with your identity. So, okay, here's the digression I wanted to go on, because, when you look at astrology, there's a difference between, there's a symbolic difference for some astrologers on whether the planet needs to be in the same degree, like within the degree, the 24th degree, or within the 23rd degree, or something like that, versus just being within 59 arc minutes, within that 60 arc minute, the 59th arc minute. Like, does it need to be in the same exact degree or just within 1 degree? That is some Virgo shit. That you want to talk about, like, little tiny details and getting into there. There's a difference between being in the same degree, potentially, and being within 1 degree, but in different degrees. Like, this one's at the 23rd degree and this one's at the 24th degree. You can pick that apart if you want. I'm not gonna. I'm just basically saying, for the better part of this week, from October 18th to about October 25th, we're going to have this very intense solar Venusian energy. And any insights we get, if nothing is happening external in your life, if you're like, well, Claire said this Venus Cazimi was supposed to be the tits and I'm seeing nothing, look for internal realizations, internal insights. Sometimes it's not earth shattering, but sometimes really simple insights can validate something really profound. Sometimes the insight itself is a thing that then you can apply to an entirely unrelated topic. Just saying. Sometimes these things are subtle, doesn't mean they're not potent or profound. Sometimes they're happening inside of us. So what might be the difference then between a Mercury or a Venus Cazimi in Libra, in a place where Libra has all of the resources it needs to do its job? Like in Libra, Venus has the outfit they want. Venus has the stationery that they want. The party that they're throwing is in the venue that they prefer. When Venus is in Scorpio, they're trying to throw this dinner party and they are on a battlefield. They do not have the outfit that they want. They probably haven't slept. They might not have eaten in a while. And now they're expected to be diplomatic and kind and harmonious and all of these things. Venus themselves has that ability inside of themselves, no matter where they are in the chart, no matter what sign they're in. When Venus is in detriment, when Venus is in Scorpio, they are the furthest away from their Earth nighttime home. And they literally just don't have the stuff that they need to do the stuff that they want to do. So it is very interesting to me. Now, granted, like while Venus is in the heart of the sun, Venus is protected from the sun's rays. But now when Venus gets out of that chariot, when Venus steps outside of that sunbrella, it's like they are getting nailed with the sun's rays. So, we weren't expecting that. It feels like kind of a bit of cold water in the face all of a sudden. Everything seems to be going along so harmoniously, clicking along just fine. And then we get some kind of scorpionic reality check at the end of this. And I don't think anything bad is going to happen. I think if you're electing something for this Venus Cazimi, it could still be a fantastic election. I do not recommend against doing that kind of election. However, I kind of wonder what reality check we're going to be getting in Scorpio. It's almost like at the end of Libra. So just to look at like what happens as a planet's moving through the themes at the end of Libra, and then they're entering into the first decan of Scorpio, into those first decan Scorpio themes. To me, it feels like, at the end of Libra, and I'm borrowing this influence from Austin Kopic's 36 Faces work, that there's so much to consider in Libra. We're considering everybody. We're considering all the variables, what all everybody else's preferences are that they can't control. And we can get an arrogant notion, I think, in Libra that we can figure it all out, that somehow we have the power and the capability to resolve all the bits, to have a win-win-win-win scenario. And then you get into Scorpio and it's like that. It's the no-win scenario, or it is a scenario where someone has to lose. Now we're ruled by Mars, and in Mars land, not everyone can come with, not everyone can handle the battlefield, or it's just showing that for our individual preferences to be met, someone else might have to be disappointed. Someone else might have to lose out, or we might find that, maybe what I prefer, it doesn't really resolve very well with everything else that's going on that I thought I could finagle and navigate in my mind, and I just can't. Once we get into Scorpio, it's like, nah, bitch, you just have to do the thing, and you're going to make some people mad, and it is what it is. And we're Mars and we're in a battlefield. What are you going to do? Take your sword, take your shield, be diplomatic over there. And poor Venus is like, fine, I guess we will have to do it this way. It could just be more of in a more neutral sense, in a more internal sense, because Scorpio is internal. We're going from this very external influence to more of a quiet internal nighttime focus in Scorpio. It is just maybe coming to the realization that what you prefer might not be understood. Like what you like, what you love, what you value, it just might not be understood by people, and dealing with the discomfort of that. Like Libra is so much about belonging, and Mercury's here and just like, yeah, let's like figure it out. We can belong. Everyone can belong. And we get to Scorpio and it's like, oh yeah, I've been betrayed. I do not belong. So there is so many possibilities. I think y'all can probably put together some themes of things that could happen here. I think like what I'm going to be doing with this energy, thinking about my values, thinking about my wants, my desires, and how I can integrate that, knowing that I can't make everybody happy, knowing that, yeah, I might rub people the wrong way. But knowing that in order to be happy, in order to find joy with Venus, we might have to do the Scorpio thing. Now, Scorpio is strategic. That's another thing. It's like, okay, well, if I am here and if I have to deal with this dilemma or this quandary or navigate this labyrinth or whatever it is, now we have strategy because we're in Scorpio. So how are we going to deal with whatever's going on? Maybe there's a timing. Maybe there's a conversation. Maybe there's something that can be done in a strategic way. Aries doesn't have any timing at all. As a Jupiter and Aries person myself, had to figure out my timing a little bit. I can't just say shit when I want to say it. Scorpio waits. It's slow. It's nocturnal. It's internal. So it will take its time. It will wait for its moment. And that's probably the wise thing to do, is to just honor that. It could also just be privacy. You know what? People don't have to know what the fuck I'm doing. People don't have to know what I like. People don't have to know what I prefer. In Scorpio, it's very private. One other thing I was thinking about with this is we're not supposed to know everyone's opinions, our brains, our hearts, our minds. We weren't ready in the first place to know everybody's opinions as a culture, as a society. And then we got the internet and we know what everybody's thinking all the time. And it's too much. And I think it probably harms Libra the most, like of all the planets to have the internet. Yeah, these air planets, like, of course, technology is air, right? And look at how we're handling that. Look at how we are handling all of the different. Are we tolerating each other's differences? No, we're not at all. I'm not. I have a hard time with that. Oh my God. Side note. Anyone who watches Nightlight Astrology or listens to Nightlight Astrology podcast, Achyuta Babadas is the astrologer. Achyuta just did an episode on the curse of seriousness. I got read very much, but it also sounds a lot like this scenario, like, I don't know. We're not meant to like cater to everybody. And part of how we deal with that is privacy. Not everybody needs to know what the fuck's going on in our lives all the time. I just found out that Dolly Parton has a husband named Carl. I didn't even know. Like, we don't have to know everybody's shit all the time. So that's a thing to consider. Okay. I think that's enough about the Venus Cazimi. I'm going to check in with this chat and see how everybody's doing. Does anyone have anything planned? Is anyone electing anything or purposely doing something? Well, we have that Venus Cazimi in Libra. Anna has Pluto in the second house, and they've been in shopping spree mode. Yeah, I mean, Pluto, things we don't have control over all the time. So just watch out. If you feel like you must buy something and like you're so like, ask yourself why. That's another thing too. Okay, last thing. I was thinking about just Mars and Venus, and this, we're just holding space for so much Mars energy and so much Venus energy at this time toward the end of the month. And now we've got water happening. It's very much us and the other. And it's very much desire and aversion, which are basically the same thing. One invites the other. As soon as I decide I like something, what is unsaid in that, what is implied, is that I don't like not having that, or I don't like when it's not that thing that I like. And so it's almost like having a preference or having a desire or a like or a want or a lust almost implies the exact opposite feeling to come forth when that desire is not met. And that's just Venus and Mars. And those are beautiful qualities too, as far as, just thinking about what a lived experience is when we have passion and joy and excitement and motivation and ambition, and we're out there and we're like, yeah, just like, that's Venus and Mars. So it's not bad, but we just have to be really like aware of it, because if I want something, I have to ask myself, why do I want that? Do I want that because is it a want or is it a need? Not to say we can't fulfill, wants that we don't need. I mean, come on, I know I'm Capricorn, but like, oh, I'm not that Capricorn. Like we don't want to be like, depriving ourselves. But at the same time, sometimes I think we just get into the habit of wanting. We just get into the habit of wanting certain things, even long after our preferences, they change. They're not under our control, but boy, do they change. Our preferences can change. Our values can change. And we forget to check in with it. I don't check in with it usually personally until my therapist makes me and says, well, she's asking me these questions, and I'm like, why do I want? Why do I actually? And not all charts are created differently. I have a pretty desirous chart. I think some people's, they're much more rational and like they don't have to deal with that kind of stuff. So I'm not saying that everyone's just going to be unhinged and full of like, boundless desire or that will be harmful. At the same time, just like ask yourself why. Sometimes I find myself, it's like, I just want that person to like me. Like, we just want that kind of harmony. We want that sense of belonging. And it's like, why do I want that sense of belonging? Oh, could it be because I feel like I don't belong? And why is that? And is doing this thing or buying this thing going to make me feel better, or eating this thing? I don't know. But if we ask the question and we come at it with more intention, I think that can be helpful. But that at the end of the month, like, yeah, whatever you're feeling ambitious about, passionate about, desirous about, I mean, yeah, again, if it aligns with what's cool in your life, what you enjoy, what will make your quality of life better, let it rip. Do it, go for it. But things can be a little complicated in Scorpio sometimes. Okay. That's all I have to say about that. Oh, and we have the eclipses, of course. And we got to talk about that too. And that really just doubles down on it. Honestly, the eclipses being across the Taurus Scorpio axes all this time. They've been highlighting these themes, I think, just societally in general. And it makes sense because the pandemic too, I mean, just as a side thought, like the pandemic showed all of us so much. Like, I think the things we took for granted that we weren't allowed to have. And then we had this state of just being disappointed that we couldn't have what we wanted. But then also then we got things we didn't know that we didn't ask for. And then we found out we actually do like those things. So there's a lot of interplay of just what do we want and what do we don't want? And how do we manage that? How do we manage our reactions when we don't get what we want? How do we manage our reactions when we do get what we want so that it is sustainable and healthy and not unhealthy or whatever? Yeah. Okay. So on the 21st as well, moving on by the 21st. So we start off at Kazimi on the 18th. And then by the 21st, Mars reaches its station degree. Mars reaches Chiron, or sorry, my Chiron. Oh my God, I'm like putting my own chart in here. Mars is stationing on my Chiron, and clearly I cannot help but think about it. Groan. She groans in Capricorn very heavily. For the rest of you who thankfully don't have my chart, Mars is stationing at 25 degrees. But that does make a good point. If you have planets at the end of of mutable signs, so if you've got planets at the end of Virgo, if you've got planets at the end of Sag or Pisces, when Mars stations, it's going to be right on that. And Mars in Gemini, it's like, I can do so many things, but I have to pick a few so that I can progress. So that in Cancer, we can actually do the growing part. We have to make decisions. We have to make choices, especially in that last decan of Gemini. It's like, for these things or for this thing to work, this other thing probably has to go, whatever that is. And if we do that, then by the time next spring, when Mars gets into Cancer, we're going to be ready to grow it. We're going to be ready to build that protective, like stable conditions for growth. but we have to do the martial decisiveness in this place of so many choices. So that's what I think part of this Mars retrograde is going to be about. I think that's just part of Mars in Gemini. And whatever you have chosen, whatever by the end of Mars in Gemini that you're still up to, that's what's going to be growing in Cancer after next March. So just keep that in mind. I was having a thought today. I was going to make a water is wet tweet. I need to make more of these tweets that people are always tweeting stuff. And I'm just like, I love that tweet. It's a very good tweet. People should know that. But like, why am I not tweeting about this water is wet shit? So one of these water is wet things is that the benefic planets can be thought of as planets that they symbolize the conditions for growth, stable conditions for agricultural growth. If I want to grow a field, if I want to grow crops, I want the rain and the sunshine and the light and everything to be consistent, to be not extreme. The malefics, on the other hand, are extreme. Those are our extreme conditions. Now, we can have conditions for growth reflected by the benefics, and that can be favorable. That can be unfavorable. We can have stuff that grows that we do not want to grow. We can have stuff that grows that it's like, yeah, that might not turn out good, turn out well. Words. But the malefics in the same way, they represent what is more extreme, but that's not necessarily good or bad either, right? Extremeness, like, sometimes we have to do something that is not a condition for growth, like Mars, like cutting. We cut something away, but that's not bad. I think just intuitively we want to jump to that because we think less bad, separation, bad. But that's not necessarily the case. What about a tumor? If I have a tumor, I would like to not have a tumor. So we cut that baby right out, right? So I like to think about the malefics and the benefics in more of that agricultural metaphor of conditions for growth versus extreme things to do, that maybe we're not doing that extreme thing for very long, but that extreme thing was very necessary. Maybe a wall is very harsh, but maybe we need it. Maybe this foundation feels very like cold and hard and whatever, but we need that foundation. So those are ways of thinking about this that I think bring in more nuance. So Mars stationing at 25 degrees of Gemini is doing Mars stuff. It doesn't mean we need to be worried about it. It doesn't mean we need to be scared of it at all. But especially, if you find yourself very scattered, not progressing, if you're not making progress, if you're not having growth, that means that we need to pare things down more. If the garden's not growing, what needs to be pruned? Mars stationing retrograde. Okay. What else is going on with that? Mercury square Pluto that day too? Really? Why though? No, that's not true. It's just square by sign, which is still important. Yeah, I'm just looking at my notes. Sorry, y'all. Sun, Venus, Scorpio, the 23rd. Let's just move right on to that. I will say, like, okay, there's this new moon that's going to be happening. The moon is going to move through Libra. And then by the time the moon gets there, the sun and Venus will already have entered Scorpio. And so we get this new moon like right on that kazimi moment with Venus as well. So it's like all of these insights, all of this clarity, all of this relational clarity, values clarity, preferences clarity. Our soul wants to act and have free will about it. And now we've got this such a cool opportunity. I know the moon doesn't love Scorpio, but this is a time it's to reset, it's to restart, it's a new beginning. And endings and beginnings tend to go together, right? There's this constant cycle of endings and beginnings all the time. But we can start to think about what that could look like here in the Scorpio area of our chart. So for instance, for me, mine is in my 10th house of career and life path. And I am currently percolating all the ways in which I need to do X, Y, and Z to make that happen. And I can see clearly some things in my life that need to shift in order for me to do that. So, I'm going to be intenting a lot on my 10th house, intenting a lot on how I come off publicly, how I am presenting myself publicly. Sure, I'll just use myself as an example and just talk about myself, because I've figured out, I think I know what mine's going to be about, and this might help you figure out what yours is going to be about. But like in the 9th house of astrology for me in Libra, I tend to over-censor myself. I tend to be really nervous about offending people, and people are so easily offended. Like you literally can't fuck up at all with people without people being horrible, right? And I think part of this Scorpio stuff is me realizing that one must be brave, one must be courageous, and one must be prepared to piss people off. I guess I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. And if it's going to rub people the wrong way, I have to trust myself, Scorpio. I have to trust myself that I will handle those things as they come. That if I make a mistake, I know how to handle that. You apologize and you find out solutions. Libra doesn't want to make a mistake. Libra, like that's, if you got a bunch of Libra planets, like one of the hardest lessons is just how to let yourself not be perfect and make a mistake, especially when it comes to relationships and other people, allowing people to be let down, allowing people and trusting that they'll deal with it. That's something in conflict. It's weird because in conflict, it's kind of a Scorpio thing, maybe. We have to almost trust, like in a healthy conflict that the kind where you come out on the other end with more intimacy and vulnerability, because those hard conversations, if they go well, like they really do build intimacy with someone. That's what's going on here. It's like, how do we engage in conflict in a way that, does build that intimacy? But we do have to let go, and we have to trust that the other person will be okay, that they'll make space for us to have a second chance. There's a lot of trust that weirdly happens in healthy conflict. We have to trust the other person to, not abandon us. We have to trust ourselves to be able to manage any feelings or anything that come up. But we totally can trust ourselves. And if you have the right people in your life, you should be able to trust them. And it's honestly not very fair to not give people the opportunity to do that. I think for so long, I didn't let people, I didn't share my troubles with people, or I didn't share things with people that might result in conflict, because I didn't trust them to love me enough. I didn't trust them to care about me enough to hang through a conflict. So there is this bit of trust that it's almost like you're letting that other person have the opportunity to prove to you their loyalty or their whatever. Those types of things. I know that was kind of all over the place. I don't know if that was coherent, but are things coherent in Scorpio? Hopefully that landed. And we have a new moon, just new intentions. Time to think about what we want that Scorpio area of our life to look like. And that's so funny too. I'm just noticing this. I didn't notice this before, but right after that new moon, one of the moon's first contacts is actually Uranus. So it's almost like saying, maybe there's a solution, a sudden thing that happens in Taurus. Maybe there's a sudden surprise or a solution to resolve what feels unresolvable between these two places that could help. Or maybe there's just a change that's happening in Taurus. Maybe there's a change that's happening in the Taurus part, or it's probably been something you've been asked to change for a while and you probably haven't yet. But whatever those changes are that are happening in Taurus, however you're being asked to be different in Taurus, that could actually help to kind of balance whatever is needed over here in Scorpio in your chart to make these new moon type of intentions come forth into reality. So look at that Uranus and see what's going on in Taurus and see if there's any clues as to how that could be impacting these new starts, these new intentions. Oh, we're getting there. We're getting there, people. Oh my God, I'm going to go over 2 hours this time. Trying to scroll with my pen. Okay. So Mercury is squaring Pluto. Jupiter regresses back into Pisces. Yeah, let's close it out here with Jupiter going back into Pisces and then the Mars retrograde. Those are the last two big things of the month. And we are going to also have Mercury coming into Scorpio at the end of the month. So lots of big shifts. Yeah, this last week is so interesting with all of the shifts that are happening. I am just so fascinated with how this is going to feel. Am I wrong? Why did I say Mercury was ingressing? Hold, please. Hold, please. Oh, it's because I'm on the hour, not the day. It's because I don't know how to use my software. Thought I made a notes error. I didn't. Okay, there we go. Yeah, by the 29th. That's when we've got all of these planets in Scorpio. We've got Jupiter back in water. And these areas are harmoniously communicating. So whatever we're figuring out in Scorpio by this time of the month, that is really directly influencing what Jupiter is doing down in the second. Jupiter brings expansion and understanding. I think there's going to be that this is internal, this is nocturnal, and it's water. So I am going to be looking more for this transit in terms of our internal lived experience, in terms of our connections and our relationships, and more of the secret or private conversations that happen. Because okay, we've got our relationship person, our conversations person, our words person, but it's private, it's quiet, it's slow, it's strategic. We're here for understanding. We're getting understanding. We're expanding our picture of what's going on. Maybe we didn't have the big picture view before. Oh, maybe we're starting to see maybe that big picture start to kind of come into view. Still retrograde though. Neptune is here. Things are not what they seem necessarily. So, again, October is just a much better month than September for deciding things. But I think also by the end of October, we're going to understand things a little bit differently. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else on that, but just with all the water now, before I was like, bring the water back in. We're so intellectual. We're so heady and cognitive. Now the reminder is going to be, it's like we've gone on that side of the ditch. Now we got to come on from this side of the ditch. It's like there's way too much water and we need to make sure to do the air and the earth things. And now do we not have any fire except for when the moon? Yeah, now we've lost our fire. So fire is action, fire is motivation, fire is all of that vitality. It is, yeah. It's that. So there's not as much of that going on. There's not as much movement. The heat quality is what creates movement and action and all of that. So this is slower, it's very emotional. It's much more emotional. But the pace also gets a lot slower. That's fine by me, because if we have that many water planets, we're going to need to slow down in the external parts of our lives to process it, to figure it out probably. So that's fine. Okay. So last things here. So Jupiter. Okay. So Jupiter in Pisces. Last time we had Jupiter there, we had it for a lot of last year. And then January, or it was the end of December, January of 2022, Jupiter left Pisces and went into Aries. And we've had Jupiter Aries for the last several months. Now we're getting 2 more months of, maybe it's not even 2 whole months of Jupiter back into Pisces. Yeah, it's just a short little stint here. But I think we should be thinking back, like what was going on last year with Jupiter and Pisces? I'm so sorry. I'm messing up my dates here. Just going to go back. Let's just go back a year. Was it May that he switched? Lost my mind. Yeah, sorry. So we had Jupiter in Pisces through the spring. It was end of April into May that we still had Jupiter in Pisces. At that point, I was worrying about the hype train because Jupiter is so enthusiastic. It wants to say yes. But in Pisces, it's like, it's hype. We're given a story or we believe something to be something that it is really maybe not. At this point, in November of this year, October, November of this year, and December, anything you were doing at the beginning of the year is coming back around. I don't know if it's going to be a return to those things that we were doing in the first quarter or two in the Pisces part of our chart, but go to the Pisces part of your chart, whatever house that is, like say it is the 7th, like this chart we have here in front of us. What was going on if you're a Virgo rising, for instance, in your relationships and your partnerships in quarter 1, quarter 2 of this year? What was going on in there? Were there opportunities? Was there understanding between you and your partner? Was your partner getting a raise? Was your partner, having other opportunities of their own? And now we're at this part of the year, coming back to some of that and getting even more understanding about what might be the case, what might be true. Jupiter is truth. Jupiter is honesty. It is seeking of knowledge. It is education and teaching and learning. So what are we learning? What are we, that's why I say understand, but what are we learning? And then Jupiter, eventually when it goes direct, I think that's when we're going to finally have our final whole big wide understanding of what that Jupiter and Pisces time was for us. So if you did say yes to something and it's still going great, I think we're out of the woods. I think we don't really have to worry too much about Neptune shenanigans, so if by like November, end of November, Jupiter stuff, your Pisces part of your chart is going okay, there's no shenanigans. You weren't lied to. You weren't deceived. The project worked out. No one did a bait and switch with you. If you're all good there by November, whatever you said yes to, I think we can be like, okay, yeah, I think this is going to work. I think we're good. We're good. Yeah, we're out of the woods. If you're still having some trepidation, if you're like, I don't know if this person is giving me the whole story, hang in there for when Jupiter stations direct, that's next month. So we'll talk about that more next month. And if you do have Pisces, wherever you have Pisces, just knowing that Jupiter is expansion, Jupiter is opportunity. So I have Pisces in the 2nd. I'm going to be looking for opportunities and growth when it comes to my finances for money. I need my bank account to grow. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on with Jupiter going back into Pisces. What do I want to grow and expand and understand in that area of my chart? And finally, we get Mars stationing. So it entered its station degree, I said on the 21st, Mars entered in 25 degrees. And then on October 30th, that is when Mars actually stations. So really, Mars is not moving at all. It hasn't been moving for days. And it is just being Mars very, very loudly. It's very bright. It's not exactly opposite the sun, but the sun, kind of like how a full moon gets really, really bright when the moon is exactly opposite the sun. When any planet is really opposite the sun, it gets very, very bright. Right now, Jupiter is so bright. Like go outside and look at Jupiter because it's opposite the sun and it's very, very bright. Mars also pretty bright in the night sky, and it's just going to keep getting brighter. Whenever Mars is retrograde, it is very, very bright and visible in the sky. Definitely check it out. And so be writing in your journals, this whole week into November, so that we can start to clock what this Mars retrograde might be about for you in the Gemini part of your chart. Now, Mars retrograde, in general, with the faster planets going retrograde, I look at it in a few different ways. We can look at it in terms of just extremeness of that planet. I think that's more of like how Jyotish astrology looks at it, is that retrograde planet, especially during the stations, is just super loud and powerful. The other thing, maybe as the retrograde progresses, as Mars picks up speed and gets moving again, I sometimes see some inconsistency with that retrograde planet. So in the case of Mars, maybe we're taking an action and then we're not taking an action. Maybe we have motivation today and I don't have motivation tomorrow. Now, if our motivation wanes, if our ambitions wane and we didn't pace ourselves, so, we've got a billion things on our plate, Saturn is still here to help. Saturn is still here with the trine. If that motivation starts to wane, that's where discipline picks up the slack. So when the actual motivation to act a certain way, we're just having a hard time with it, that's when discipline, restraint, and Saturn can come in to help us out. If you are tired, rest. When Mars is retrograde, we don't want to be over-efforting, just overworking something to the point where we can hurt ourselves, or just we're spinning our tires. If you get that sense that you are spinning your tires, ask for help. That was one of the best things I learned in physics. Of all of the things I learned in physics, had nothing to do with physics, but my physics professor, because I had been working on just problems at the back of the book, like you do. And I was getting stuck on a number of problems. And at that point in my life, I was in undergrad. I was like a baby, and I was just trying to do it on my own. I would read a whole ass book at that point in my life on my own to try to answer a question instead of asking somebody for help. And I finally went to my physics professor, and I told him, I was like, yeah, I've been struggling with this one for a while. And he had explained it to me, and I got it right away. It was like so much time and effort, and all I had to do was just go ask somebody. And he said, there's no sense in spinning your tires. At a certain point, you've done everything you can do on your own. You got to ask for help. So when you're spinning your tires and you're not getting anywhere, stop deluding yourself, swallow your pride, go ask for help. Anyway, I digress. What else? We got extremeness. We have inconsistency. We also have just reversals, or the rule of re's. And with Mars, what are we reing? Reaction. Watch out for your reactions. Re-engaging. Maybe we weren't, like I said, we're doing something, then we're not doing something. We were acting on something, and now we're not acting on something. There can be kind of a back and forth with that a little bit. Some of that could be to do with inconsistency, just with your own motivation. It could also be external things coming in, interrupting, that causes that inconsistency. So you might be like, yeah, let's go, let's do this. But shit just keeps happening, that I'm trying to act and things just keep stopping me from acting. Like that could happen. And just doing things differently. That's the final way. With retrograde planets, we're doing it differently than what people expect. People expect that planet to move forward in the sky in that direction. They do not expect it to be moving in the other direction. So we are doing things that we might not, or that others might not expect. Not bad or good. Could be great. Don't know. Again, so we don't have to worry, but certainly is very interesting. This is going to be the case for the rest of the month. So, through November, we're still this is until January. So there's 3 months, pretty much all of November, pretty much all of December, most of January, Mars is retrograde. Unfortunately, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, like, well, I should, no, that's not the weather. Weather is hemisphere specific. Holidays, holidays are not necessarily, this is during the holidays. Like, why? Why did this happen during the holidays? I don't want this to happen during the holidays. So we are pacing ourselves. We are not being scattered. We are doing our shopping early, so early. Just like start your Christmas shopping now. Why don't you start your whatever shopping you got to do, whatever you need to do to prepare for the holidays? We should all probably just start now. Because if we have problems with consistency, pacing, extremeness, lack of consistency, like, yeah, it's like we don't need that. Already the holiday season is too chaotic. So anywho, I think that's it. Is that all I really wanted to say? There's more to say, I'm sure. And with Mars being retrograde, we always want to look at who is ruling it. And Mercury is ruling Mars as it's retrograde. And so we want to look at Mercury, keep an eye on Mercury. So pretty much for all of November, December, January, we also want to keep our eye on Mercury. While Mercury is in Scorpio, they don't see each other. They don't have a traditional aspect, meaning that of these Ptolemaic aspects, they're aspects because they share something in common. For instance, like, we can make an aspect, a sextile between Scorpio and Virgo, and they share things in common. They're both nighttime signs. So they share that pacing. They have like the similar pacing. They have that similar internal quality, or that responding to influence versus giving out the influence. That's very different than a daytime sign. An air sign is a nocturnal water sign. They don't have anything in common. And it's a blind spot. 150 degrees just happens to be an actual blind spot that humans have. So it's a bit of a blind spot. They do have a mutual reception for a while, at least until Mercury gets into Sag, which is farther down the road, but they do have a mutual reception. Mercury is in Mars's home and Mars is in Mercury's home. And so even though they don't have that traditional aspect, they do have a connection with each other. So it might take a little bit of finagling for them to exchange resources, but the point is that they could potentially, or they're at least a little bit more sympathetic to what each other is doing in each other's homes. So meaning that whatever we are coming to understand in Scorpio, whatever we are, those internal realizations that we're doing, acting on them, there is a bit of a connection. It's not totally disconnected. We might say that there's a bit of a disconnect there, but again, being there's a mutual reception, there is a little bit more of an ability for these planets to work together on challenges versus just not even being aware of each other and kind of not the left hand, not knowing what the right hand is doing. But then as Mercury progresses along, so like when Mercury gets into Sag, that will change Mars's retrograde experience, because now Mercury can actually see it by an opposition. We'll have to deal with the fact that Mercury is in Sagittarius and like has a hard time there, but at least they're in that more strong connection with each other in that opposition where we have room to work with the issue, with the challenge. So final thing then, just the Halloween forecast. I wanted to look at that because Lord knows we all love Halloween. The moon is going to spend all night applying to the sun, and then it's going to be applying to Venus by a square. It feels like, just the restrictions that we've been dealing with in general are surprise going to be maybe a buzzkill for some people. It's like the moon is here in Saturn, or just any kind of restraint, or the moon just not being able to do all of the feeling and the need, having its needs met in all of the ways it needs to be met, the moon. And it's just in this place where it's held back by Saturn. Saturn's like, no, you need to make sure it's within this container and that it's happening in this way. It can be kind of a buzzkill, but at the same time, it gives us a little bit more restraint, which sometimes is good, especially if you have been overindulging or you haven't been having good boundaries or pacing yourself. this could be a helpful thing. But it's not super fun for partying on Halloween. Granted, this is a Monday, so maybe people will be partying the night before. Oh my God, are we all going to be? Oh, shoot. So if the Halloween parties happen on Friday, Saturday, moon is in Capricorn. If they, for whatever reason, happen on Sunday, we get more of like moon in, if they actually happen on Halloween, we get moon in Aquarius. So it just kind of feels like the pandemic might reign on our Halloween parades, but as it should. We are still in one. Just going to throw in my little opinion. And of course, in the spooky season, we always have the sun in Scorpio, but now we also have both of these folks here, just adding to that expressiveness. It feels like an extra expressive Halloween, but a little restrained. But look who has the upper hand, the expression. So the expressive parts of ourselves that are going to want to be out there doing stuff on Halloween, being ourselves, wearing the coolest costume, winning all the costume competitions. There might be a little bit of restriction. We might have to kind of finagle some things, but that's what I see for that day. It's a fine enough day. I'm not too worried about Halloween. So I hope it's a good one for everyone. And that's all I have. Wow, we did it. We did a whole forecast. I'm going to check on this chat. Any final questions? Did I skip anything that anyone was interested in? Oh my gosh. This is the most happening chat I have ever seen. Oh, smash the like button, hit the subscribe button. Help. Help me. Please help me. I need clients. Get bookings. Get readings from me. My books are wide open. I don't know how the hell all these people are getting. I got to be louder. I give fantastic readings. I'm going to just toot my own horn. I'm very much like this in consult. This is how I'm in consult. We're having a conversation. We're talking about things. I'm hearing about your life, and we're figuring out how to strategize and problem solve. I'm a Capricorn. I like to have a plan. I like to have action items. I like homework. I like giving homework. Usually if you get a reading from me, you will probably also get a follow-up email with some resources. I have Jupiter in Aries. So as soon as I learn something and I'm like, that's helpful. Clearly everyone needs to know about this. That's me. So that's what you get. If you have any issues with affording readings, or like getting a reading is difficult for some reason, I have a sliding scale. I don't want money to get in the way of anything astrological related. So shoot me an email. I think that's in the comments below, aligninglight@gmail.com. You can email me with questions or any concerns. Let's see if anyone's got any final comments. Yeah, watch your own bobber. I love that. That's my mom saying. Yeah, that's what we say in Minnesota when it's like, mind your own business. Don't worry about them. Don't compare yourself to them. Just watch your own business. Yeah. And it comes from this idea when you're fishing with someone, the last thing you want to do when you're fishing with someone is be looking at their bobber and lamenting the fact that they're getting a fish. And in the meantime, your bobber is bobbing and you miss it. That's like the last thing you want. So you got to watch your own bobber. Hi, Max. Welcome. Nice to see you again. Maxie Gascon is in the chat. Max Gascon, Astrologo, and they are an astrologer, and they also do traditional modern synthesis. Maybe I'm speaking for you. I believe you have a little bit of modern synthesized in there. Just so knowledgeable and accurate and just on. And they also started a podcast, a really great podcast. So definitely check out Max Gascon. And then we've got, thanks, Kyra. I hope you had a good time. Yeah, I mean, Venus and Libra is going to be fantastic for socializing. And I think once everything gets into Scorpio, I mean, anytime we get from one sign into the next, it's always that course correction, so to speak, of that those qualities that the last sign didn't have. So in Libra, we are out there. We are, ready to mingle. We are talking with people, sharing ideas, being external, like being open and connecting. And in Scorpio, we are private. All of a sudden, it's like, I don't fucking want to know what they know. I don't want them to know what I know. It's just, so, I mean, not necessarily that we're not going to be socializing or that it's not advantageous to or beneficial to socialize when things go into Scorpio, but we might just want to have a little bit more private time then. Yeah. And Anna brings up a nice clarification. New moon, new beginnings in Scorpio. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and you know what? I totally forgot to, oh my God, this is going to be so long. This isn't over. We got to go back. I forgot to talk about the eclipses. Hold on. Let me catch up with this chat. Sorry if someone left. I was like, oops, I'm not done. Oh my gosh. Thanks for the love, y'all. I'm getting some validation. Y'all are so nice. Beep, beep, beep. Okay. Just kidding. One more thing. One last thing. Okay. The eclipses. I get so focused. Oh, you know why? It's because I don't have the nodes on here. It might help if I actually put them on, huh? So eclipses, what are they? Okay. We have the path of the moon and the path of the sun. And I think we like to think of it all happening like on the same plane, like this coaster. So like the sun and the moon they're not going on the same circle. It's like two circles that are like this. Can you see that? My coaster example. It's actually like this. And their paths are like 5 degrees apart from each other, about just slightly. And so they're not always like, sometimes the moon is here and sometimes the sun is down here, and they might actually be like at the same degree, but they don't get in each other's way. An eclipse are these points where they meet, where those paths meet. And those are the eclipses, coaster version. And there's a bunch of symbolism. I'm not going to get into all of it right now because I've been talking for too long probably, but they're concentrated, very energetic times. They are unstable because the reason why we go for that or why some astrologers go for that more not such a cool configuration, not so great for manifesting or doing your intentions or whatever, is because the ancient people saw eclipses as ominous. They were not auspicious events. They were not seen as good because the one thing that you could count on as an ancient person was the sun and the moon. It's like everyone's dying all the time because it's 2000 years ago. No one lives past 40. The only thing I can count on besides betrayal and taxes and death is, the sun and the moon's light being consistent. And if those are interrupted, how unsettling. The animals act weird. The animals they're confused. So as a human, it's like, I don't know about this. I don't know. So when we're thinking about trying to do things in our life and planting seeds in really stable soil, this is not it. Eclipses are not stable soil to plant seeds in my astrological opinion. Now, there are plenty of people who have eclipses in their birth chart. There are plenty of people who have started relationships, gotten married on eclipses, had babies on eclipses. Those folks are fine. Everything's fine. It's just that then that eclipse energy and all of the transits that will, eclipses as a transit for that eclipse baby or that eclipse event, that's baked in. So every 6 months, every time we have eclipses, it might be more important for that person. If you have eclipse energy in your chart, eclipses might be more important for you, or you might experience them in a special way. Almost very similarly to how, someone with a Scorpio sun is going to have a special experience when the sun goes through Scorpio for them, because that's what they know. That's what they have, like a Mercury retrograde person living through a Mercury retrograde. It's different than me, who doesn't have that. So again, nothing to be concerned about, but it is a bit unstable. So when was this? 25th of October and November 8th. And eclipses come in pairs. There's always a solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse, and they're 2 weeks apart. So this whole span of time between October 25th and November 8th is this eclipse portal. We talk about it like a portal. man, it does feel like that sometimes. It's like, yeah, it's just it's a 2 week span of time where we can sense a lot of shifts. We can sense a lot of changes usually happening because they are great beginnings and endings. They're potentially culminations, maybe even like, just it's like a new moon and a full moon, but more and unstable. So that's how I look at eclipses. The one in Scorpio, beginnings and endings as it relates to the Scorpio place in your chart. Beginnings and endings. So if, let's say you have Scorpio in the 11th house, maybe you're a Capricorn rising and you've got Scorpio in the 11th, maybe we're doing really great beginnings and endings with this eclipse in terms of our aspirations, in terms of our social spheres, in terms of the people we network with, who we're hanging out with. All of that might change in the 11th house. Great beginnings and endings, not necessarily good or bad, certainly potent, important, meaningful. 2 weeks later, and Venus is there. I mean, so, might have something to do with relationships, might have something to do with relating, values, preferences in that area. Maybe you just don't value what that group of friends values anymore. Maybe you used to aspire towards something, dear Capricorn rising, and you have to let go of that aspiration. It's so perfect. Actually, I have a Capricorn rising friend. She wouldn't mind me talking about her. I love her very much. She's fantastic. I'll say nice things about her behind her back in public. But she's a Capricorn rising and she just had a baby. She just gave birth and she has Scorpio 11th house. Can you put 2 and 2 together? Like it's pretty obvious that one. It's like when you have a baby, they've had the eclipses across their 5th and their 11th. What happens when you have a baby? What happens? You have to change your social life. You kind of are forced to reconsider what your aspirations are going to be because you have this obligation in the 5th, right? A beautiful, bouncing, lovely obligation. So it's natural. It's not good or bad. It just is. It's natural. So that is just one example. Then 2 weeks later, on the 8th of November, which we'll talk about more next month, but we're going to be having a full moon, a lunar eclipse, and it's with Uranus. So this is pretty fascinating, huh? So this is a lunation cycle too. Whatever you intended on at that Scorpio new moon. Or actually, did that even count? Was that close enough? Oh my gosh. Mercury retrograde. I just have to double check everything. I'm just like second guessing myself so much. Okay, yeah, it's close enough. So for an eclipse to be an eclipse, I'll just tell you what my brain is doing right now. The moon has to be within 13 degrees of the node. The moon's orb is 13 degrees. If the moon is too far away from the node, or the sun is like, if they're not within a certain amount, it doesn't count as an eclipse. If it's like right on, it's a complete eclipse. If it's a little bit off, like this one, which is like 11 degrees off because the sun is at 2, the new moon is happening. Here we go. Yeah, it's like literally at the edge. It's like 12. So this is like an eclipse where like just a part of the other is occulted. Just part of the sun or part of the moon is blocked out. It's not the whole thing. So yeah, now you understand that. Sorry. I just wanted to double check. So anyway, in the 8th, then we've got a culmination. It's like we're intenting things at the new moon at this eclipse. And it's an eclipse and we're culminating with the lunar eclipse. I remember, because it was hard for me at first when I was learning about eclipses to remember which one was the solar eclipse and which one was the lunar eclipse. The solar eclipse is the new moon one. The lunar eclipse is the full moon one. And I remember because the lunar eclipse, you can see the moon. The moon is the one that you can see. In a solar eclipse, the sun is the one that you can see. You can't see the moon in the solar eclipse because the moon and the sun are together, and you can actually see the moon in the lunar eclipse because the moon is there. I don't know if it was just me that had trouble with that, because I know people like do, they'll like post something online. I see on Twitter and someone's like, don't say it is like saying the avian bird flu or the swine pig flu, saying like a new moon solar eclipse or a full moon lunar eclipse. And I am going to actually keep being redundant and doubling up because I had trouble remembering which one was which. So I assume other people might too. So I'm going to call it a new moon solar eclipse, and everyone can laugh at me and think I'm stupid or whatever. I know. And then again, lunar eclipse culminations. What's culminating? Look at the Taurus place in your chart. What's coming to fruition? What's coming to be? What's coming to manifestation? What's real? What can you see? And it might not be very expected. You know, Uranus is it's surprises. If this already was not stable, now it is even more unstable. So yeah, I am going to give no recommendations for this one, except just watch and write in your journals. Watch and write in your journals. Venus is here to help. Venus can see it 100%. Mars cannot see what's going on up here, but that's okay. All right. That's it. That's all I had. Thanks everybody for your time, for spending time with me, for nerding out together in the chat. It makes my heart very full. I'll be back in 2 weeks on Instagram. I do my office hours Instagram live at 7 p.m. Central Time on the second Tuesday of every month. I have all my events up on my website, www.aligninglightastrology.com. So please check out my website, and you can see all my events. You can see all my bookings, the type of services, the type of offerings that I have, information about me, information about my sliding scale. So please check out all of that. Hit the like button, subscribe if you have not subscribed. All of that helps me. It helps me be more visible so I can help more people. So let's see, any final comments? No, I think that's it. So I thank you so much. This recording will be here. It does take a little bit for the captions to come up. YouTube has to do its things. But yeah, okay. Have a great October, everybody. We did it. We did Mestember. Mestember is over. We're going to move forward, and we're finally going to get some water at the end of this month. Don't forget to take care of your emotions this month. Don't let them pile up until the end of the month, because there's going to be a lot of that probably. Okay. All right. Love you. Bye-bye.